Ladies and gentlemen, this is Energy War Decoded here. I want you to look at a specific number on your screen right now. 409 million barrels. It is Sunday, December 29th, 2025, 3:47 p.m. Eastern Time. That number, 409 million barrels, is how much oil America has left in its Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Our emergency supply, our insurance policy, our last line of defense against energy catastrophe. And I know exactly what you're feeling right now. You're thinking, that sounds like a lot of oil. You're thinking, 409 million barrels? We're fine. You're thinking gas is cheap right now at $2.89 a gallon. So what's the problem? Let me show you what 409 million barrels actually means. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve has a capacity of 714 million barrels. 714 million. We are at 57% capacity, not 90%, not 80%, not even 70%, 57%. What happened in the last 48 months is not just a drawdown for high gas prices. It is not just Biden releasing emergency oil. It is not just temporary supply management. This is the largest depletion of America's strategic oil reserve in history. 305 million barrels gone. 305 million barrels sold, released, drained from the caverns built to protect you during war, during embargo, during crisis. And here's what they're not telling you. The highest the SPR has ever been was 726.6 million barrels in December 2009. The reserve was at 638 million barrels in January 2021. Today, 409 million. If you don't understand this now, if you don't see what's happening in the next 6 to 14 days, you're going to wake up on January 15th, 2026, and the price you're seeing at the pump will not be $2.89. Because in exactly 6 days, the EIA releases its first weekly petroleum status report of 2026. In 9 days, OPEC Plus meets to review their production quotas. In 14 days, the Trump administration's Department of Energy will complete the first delivery of their so-called refill program, a purchase of exactly 1 million barrels. 1 million. To refill a 305 million barrel hole. Do the math with me. 1 million divided by 305 million equals 0.3%. They are refilling the Strategic Petroleum Reserve at a pace of 0.3% per delivery. The clock is ticking. And what I'm about to show you is why the next 14 days will determine whether America faces its first energy crisis since 1973, or whether we slip quietly into the most profitable oil price manipulation scheme in modern history. What you are witnessing right now is not a miracle of American energy abundance. It is not proof that drill baby drill is working. It is not evidence that free markets are functioning properly. Gas did not drop to 289 cents because supply suddenly increased. OPEC did not suddenly become generous. Saudi Arabia did not suddenly care about American consumers. What you're seeing is a bear trap. Right now, West Texas Intermediate crude, the benchmark price for American oil, is trading at $57.32 per barrel. Brent crude, the global benchmark, is at $60.84 per barrel. 1 year ago, Brent was at $74 per barrel. 6 months ago, WTI was at $83 per barrel. 3 months ago, oil was at $71 per barrel. Oil prices have crashed 18% in 2025, the steepest annual decline since 2020, and every mainstream outlet is celebrating. Cheap gas for Christmas, lowest prices in 4 years, relief for American families. Here's what they're not showing you. The U.S. government bought the average barrel in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve for $29.70. $29.70 per barrel. Today, oil is trading at $57 per barrel. The Biden administration sold 180 million barrels in 2022 at an average price of $95 per barrel. Let me say that again. They bought at $29.70. They sold at $95. That's a $65.30 profit per barrel on paper. Multiply that by 180 million barrels. That's $11.75 billion in profit from selling America's emergency oil supply. And where did that money go? The SPR Petroleum account received approximately $17 billion from the 2022 emergency sales. But here's the catch. Oil purchases, other expenses, and congressional rescissions depleted emergency sale proceeds from the account. Translation, they spent it. They redirected it. They used your emergency oil fund for other priorities. And now the reserve sits at 409 million barrels, the lowest level since 1984, and oil is at $57 per barrel. the perfect price to refill. Donald Trump, in his January 20th, 2025 inauguration speech, said exactly this. We will bring prices down, fill our strategic reserves up again, right to the top, and export American energy all over the world. Right to the top. That means 714 million barrels. Full capacity. That means purchasing 305 million barrels to refill the gap. At $57 per barrel, that's $17.4 billion. So who is refilling the reserve right now? I'll tell you exactly. On October 21st, 2025, the Department of Energy announced a solicitation to purchase crude oil for the SPR. How much? 1 million barrels. On November 12th, contracts were awarded to 6 companies. Delivery timeline, December 2025 through January 2026. Let's do the math together. 305 million barrels need to be purchased to return to pre-drawdown levels. 1 million barrels have been contracted. 305 million with 1 million equals 305 deliveries. If each delivery takes 2 months, December to January, that's 610 months. 610 months equals 50.8 years. At the current pace, it will take America 50 years to refill the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Now let me show you what China is doing. While America drains its reserves and slow walks the refill, China has built up its Strategic Petroleum Reserve to 1.1 billion barrels. China's reserve, 1.1 billion barrels. America's reserve, 409 million barrels. China has 2.7 times more emergency oil than the United States. Let that sink in, and here's the mechanism you need to understand. Right now, there are approximately 213 million barrels of crude oil floating on water, on tankers, in transit, not in storage, not being refined, just sitting in vessels at sea. Why? Because when oil prices crashed in November and December 2025, traders started storing oil on ships. It's called floating storage. When oil prices fall below a certain level, it becomes profitable to buy oil, store it on massive supertankers, and wait for prices to rise again. This is called contango. When the future price of oil is higher than the current price, you make money by storing oil and selling it later. Right now, with WTI at $57 and oil futures showing higher prices in Q2 2026, storing oil on ships makes perfect sense, if you're a trader. 213 million barrels on water, 305 million barrels missing from the SPR. So who benefits from this? OPEC plus producers who can hold back supply and watch prices rise. Oil traders who bought cheap and are waiting to sell high. China, which is filling its reserves at discount prices while America debates for 50 years. And who loses? American consumers who will pay $4, $5, $6 per gallon when the next crisis hits, and the SPR is still half empty. Let me give you one more data point that will blow your mind. Iran's oil loadings have continued at around 1.9 million barrels per day in recent months. But with Chinese independent refiners hitting their import quotas, Iranian oil on water had 40 million barrels since August 2025. 40 million barrels of sanctioned Iranian oil just floating at sea. Who's buying it? Who's storing it? Who's waiting? The players in this game know something you don't. They know that in 6 days, 9 days, 14 days, something changes. Let's do the math together. Get your calculator out. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve currently holds 409 million barrels. Full capacity, 714 million barrels. Gap, 714 by 409 equals 305 million barrels needed. Current WTI crude price, $57 per barrel. 305 million barrels and $17.38 billion. $17.385 billion to refill the SPR at today's prices. But here's the problem. Congress has only appropriated $171 million for the refill so far through the Working Families Tax Cut legislation. $171 million at $57 per barrel equals 3 million barrels. Not 305 million, 3 million. That's about 0.98% of the total gap. Energy Secretary Chris Wright has reportedly requested $20 billion to refill the SPR. $20 billion, 57 per barrel, 150.8 million barrels. That would overfill the reserve by 45 million barrels. Great plan. Except Congress hasn't approved the $20 billion. They've approved $171 million. And every day that passes, oil prices fluctuate. On December 1st, 2025, WTI was at $59 per barrel. On December 16th, WTI hit $56.82, a near 5-year low. On December 29th, today, WTI is at $57.32. That $2 per barrel swing might seem small, but let's calculate what it means at scale. 305 million barrels, 2 equals $610 million difference. If oil rises from $57 to $65, a very possible scenario given Middle East tensions, the refill cost increases by $305 million, $8, $2.44 billion. This is not speculation, this is arithmetic. While you are paying $2.89 per gallon at the pump in America, national average as of December 29, 2025, Oklahoma residents pay $2.34 per gallon. California residents pay $4.30 per gallon. Hawaii residents pay $4.44 per gallon. Same country, same oil. $2.10 spread between Oklahoma and Hawaii. Why? Let me show you what Saudis are paying. In Saudi Arabia, gasoline costs approximately 62 cents per gallon. 62 cents. In America, the national average is $2.89 per gallon. That's a $2.27 spread. Same commodity, same global oil market, same West Texas Intermediate and Brent benchmarks, but a $2.27 per gallon difference. Now let's talk about profit margins. In December 2025, Saudi state producer Aramco cut the price of Arab Light crude for Asian customers by 30 cents per barrel, to the lowest level since January 2021. Why would Saudi Arabia cut prices when global demand exists? Because they're competing for Chinese buyers, while simultaneously managing OPEC plus production cuts to keep prices from collapsing entirely. Saudi Arabia has maintained a voluntary production cut of 1 million barrels per day since 2023. 1 million barrels per day, 365 days, 365 million barrels per year, removed from supply. At current Brent prices of $60.84 per barrel, 365 million barrels, 60.84 to $22.2 billion in annual revenue. Saudi Arabia is choosing not to earn. Why? To keep prices from collapsing below $50 per barrel, the level at which Saudi Arabia's budget breaks even. Meanwhile, in America, oil production continues at record levels. U.S. crude oil production in 2025, approximately 13.5 million barrels per day. That's 4.9 billion barrels per year. We produce 4.9 billion barrels per year. We consume 20.3 million barrels per day in 2023, equals 7.4 billion barrels per year. Gap, 7.4 to 4.9 equals 2 billion barrels per year that must be imported. But wait, the U.S. is a net exporter as of 2024, according to the IEA. How? Because we export refined products, gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, while importing crude oil. We import cheap heavy crude from Canada, Mexico, and Venezuela. We refine it in Gulf Coast refineries with some of the most sophisticated equipment in the world. We export high-margin refined products to Europe, Latin America, and Asia. Refinery margins in late 2025 surged back to levels last seen after Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Why? Because while crude is abundant and cheap, refined products are tight. Gasoline futures in New York Harbor fell to $1.70 per gallon in December 2025, the lowest since early 2021. But refinery margins, the spread between crude input costs and refined product output prices, are massive right now. Here's what they don't want you to know. Crude oil at 57 per barrel, $1.36 per gallon, 1 barrel, 42 gallons. Add refining costs, 40 cents per gallon. Add distribution and marketing, add 35 per gallon. Add federal taxes, 184 per gallon. Add state taxes, average 32 cents per gallon. Total $1.36 plus 40 plus 135 plus 184 plus 32 equals 2.614 per gallon. But you're paying $2.89 per gallon on average. Where's the extra 0.276 per gallon going? Into margins, into profits, into shareholder returns. The American Petroleum Institute reports that U.S. refineries processed 16.6 million barrels per day in 2025. 16.6 million barrels per day, 365 days equals 6.06 billion barrels per year. 6.06 billion barrels, 42 gallons per barrel, 254.5 billion gallons per year. If there's an X276 per gallon in margin, 254.5 billion gallons times 0.276 equals $70.2 billion per year. That's $70.2 billion flowing through the system beyond the basic input costs, taxes, and reasonable operational margins. Let that sink in. This isn't the first time. Let me show you. 1973 oil embargo. OPEC Arab nations cut production and embargoed exports to the U.S. Oil prices quadrupled from $3 to $12 per barrel. gas lines, rationing, odd-even license plate days. Result: Congress created the Strategic Petroleum Reserve in 1975 as insurance against future embargoes. 2008 price spike: oil hit $147 per barrel in July 2008. Gas reached $4.11 per gallon nationally. Speculation: Middle East tensions, rising Chinese demand. Result: financial crisis later that year crashed oil to $30, but the spike devastated American budgets. 2020 negative oil: April 20th, 2020. WTI crude futures went negative to $37.63 per barrel. Traders paid people to take oil because storage was full during COVID lockdowns. Result: massive supply glut, bankruptcies across shale producers, economic chaos. 2022 Russia-Ukraine crisis. Russia invaded Ukraine February 24th, 2022. Oil spiked from $92 to $123 per barrel within weeks. Gas hit $5.02 per gallon nationally by June 2022. Biden released 180 million barrels from the SPR to bring prices down. Result: gas prices fell, but the SPR dropped from 568 million to 388 million barrels by October 22, the lowest since 1984. Notice the pattern? Every crisis depletes the reserve. Every cheap oil period is an opportunity to refill. But refilling requires money, political will, and time. Right now, we have cheap oil, $57 per barrel. We don't have the money, only $171 million appropriated. We don't have the political will, both parties arguing about budget priorities, and we're running out of time. The International Energy Agency, IEA, projects a global oil surplus of 3.84 million barrels per day in 2026. That should keep prices low, right? Not if OPEC Plus decides to extend production cuts. Not if Middle East tensions escalate. Not if China's economy rebounds faster than expected and oil demand surges. Not if 213 million barrels floating on water suddenly get purchased and moved into permanent storage. As of December 29, 2025, Saudi Arabia conducting airstrikes in Yemen. Iran declaring full-scale war with the US, Europe, and Israel. Trump administration escalating naval blockade of Venezuela. Ukraine striking Russian refineries. Each of these is a supply risk. Each could trigger a price spike. And when oil spikes, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is supposed to release oil to stabilize prices. But the reserve is at 409 million barrels, 57% full. The SPR can release a maximum of 4.4 million barrels per day. At that rate, the current 409 million barrels would last. 409 million but a 4.4 million per day equals 93 days. 3 months. If a major supply disruption occurs, let's say Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz, through which 21% of global oil passes daily, the SPR could stabilize U.S. markets for exactly 93 days before it runs dry. Not 125 days like when it was at 550 million barrels in 2021. Not 165 days like when it was at its peak of 726 million barrels in 2009. 93 days. And in 6 days, the EIA releases data that could show whether U.S. commercial inventories are building or drawing. In 9 days, OPEC Plus decides whether to maintain, extend, or adjust production cuts. In 14 days, the first 1 million barrels of Trump's refill gets delivered, representing 0.3% of the total gap. This is not about if a crisis happens. This is about when. And when could be 6 days from now, or 6 months, or 6 years. But when it happens, America will have half the insurance it had in 2009. We are staring at the clock. It is exactly 6 days until the first major market-moving event of 2026. January 4th, 2026 is not a vague prediction about sometime next year. It is the date of the EIA's first weekly petroleum status report of 2026. This report will show U.S. crude oil inventories, commercial plus SPR, gasoline stocks, refinery utilization rates, imports versus exports. The market will scrutinize these numbers. Traders will make billion-dollar bets based on this data. And if the report shows that commercial crude stocks fell during the holiday season despite low prices, it signals that demand is stronger than the global surplus narrative suggests. If the report shows gasoline inventories building despite the holidays, it confirms oversupply and could push prices even lower. But if the report shows both crude draws and gasoline draws, that's the bullish signal that could trigger the next leg up. 9 days from now, January 7, 2026, OPEC Plus holds its monthly monitoring meeting. Do you really think Saudi Arabia, Russia, UAE, and the rest of OPEC Plus are sitting on production cuts of 2.2 million barrels per day out of kindness? No, they are waiting for prices to stabilize at a higher level, waiting for demand signals to strengthen, waiting for U.S. producers to cut back after months of low prices squeezed their margins. The Baker Hughes rig count, the number of active oil drilling rigs in the U.S., has been falling. In October 2025, 479 active oil rigs. In December 2025, 468 active oil rigs. That's an 11-rig drop in 8 weeks. When rig counts fall, it signals that producers are pulling back because prices aren't profitable enough to justify drilling. And when U.S. production growth slows, OPEC Plus gains market share. The IEA says there's a 3.84 million barrel per day surplus coming in 2026, but they also said global oil demand would grow by 830,000 barrels per day in 2025. What if China rebounds faster? What if India's economy grows faster than expected? What if electric vehicle adoption slows down? What if refinery utilization stays high because refined product margins are too good to pass up? Each of these variables could flip the surplus narrative into a balanced or even deficit narrative. Chevron CEO Mike Wirth recently predicted that oil prices could remain near record lows through 2026. Record lows? $57 per barrel? Let's be clear. $57 WTI is not a record low. The record low was $37.63 in April 2020. But Wirth's comment signals something else. Chevron wants prices low for a specific reason. If you're a major oil company sitting on billions of barrels of reserves, low prices mean competitors go bankrupt, small producers shut down, you consolidate market share, and when prices inevitably rise, your production is worth more. In 2024-2025, we saw massive consolidation in the oil sector. ExxonMobil acquired Pioneer Natural Resources for $60 billion. Chevron acquired Hess for $53 billion. Occidental Petroleum acquired Crown Rock for $12 billion. These deals happened while oil prices were low, because the majors know, buy low, produce high. 14 days from now, January 12, 2026, the Department of Energy expects the first contracted 1 million barrels to be delivered to the Bryan Mount SPR site. 1 million barrels. Trump promised to fill the reserve right to the top. At the current pace, it would take 610 months, 50 years. Do you think the smart money is waiting 50 years? Or do you think they're positioning right now? Because they know that on January 12th, the narrative changes from Trump promised to refill to Trump is refilling. Even if it's only 1 million barrels, the headline writes itself. U.S. begins refilling Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And when that headline hits, traders will ask, how much more is coming? If the answer is only $171 million worth, 3 million barrels total, the market yawns. But if the answer is $20 billion worth, 350 million barrels, the market reacts. Because $20 billion worth of U.S. government demand entering the market over the next 12 to 24 months is 350 million barrels of buy orders. 350 million barrels, 365 days, 958,000 barrels per day of government buying. That's almost 1 million barrels per day of demand that wasn't in the market before. And if the government is buying 1 million barrels per day, they're competing with refineries who need crude to process, traders who are trying to build inventory, China, which is also buying to fill its 1.1 billion barrel reserve. Right now, the oil market is in contango, where future prices are higher than current prices. January 2026 WTI futures, $57. June 2026 WTI futures, $62. That $5 spread incentivizes storage. But if the U.S. government starts buying aggressively, it reduces available supply, which pushes spot prices up and flattens the curve. When the curve flattens, storage becomes less profitable. When storage becomes less profitable, those 213 million barrels floating on water start getting sold. When they get sold, supply tightens further. When supply tightens, prices rise. Here's what I'm watching. Scenario 1, status quo. Government buys 1 million barrels, slow walks the refill. OPEC Plus maintains cuts, doesn't add supply. China's economy stays weak, demand muted. Result, oil trades 55 to 65 range through Q1 2026. Gas stays 280-320. Scenario 2, bullish breakout. Government announces $20 billion refill program, 350 million barrels. OPEC Plus extends cuts, signals discipline. China rebounds, demand increases. Result, oil breaks 70 by February, $80 by March. Gas hits $354. Scenario 3. Crisis acceleration. Middle East conflict escalates. Iran Strait of Hormuz. U.S. SPR forced to release to stabilize prices but only has 409 million barrels. OPEC Plus refuses to increase production, maximizes revenue. Result, oil spikes to 100 plus. Gas hits $5 plus. Recession risk. But here's what no one is debating. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve is at its lowest level in 41 years. The reserve was built to protect America during energy crises. And the next crisis, whether it's in 6 months or 6 years, will test whether 409 million barrels is enough. If you're old enough to remember 1973, you know what an oil embargo looks like. Gas rationing, lines around the block, panic buying, economic paralysis. The SPR was created to prevent that from ever happening again. But the SPR only works if it's full, and right now it's 57% full. Secretary Chris Wright wants $20 billion to refill the SPR. Congress has approved $171 million. That's a 99.1% funding gap. The question is, will Congress act before the next crisis? Or will they wait until oil hits $100 per barrel and then scramble to refill at triple the cost? Trump promised to fill it right to the top. So far, 1 million barrels have been contracted out of 305 million needed. That's 0.3%, not 10%, not 50%, not even 5%, 0.3%. This is Energy War Decoded. The information is out there, the data is public, the EIA reports are free, the Department of Energy press releases are online, but most people won't look. Most people will see $2.89 gas and think everything is fine. Most people won't realize that the cheapest gas prices in 4 years are also the best opportunity to refill the reserve that's been ignored. Because the next time gas hits $5, $6, $7 per gallon, it won't be because of a sudden supply shock. It will be because we had the chance to refill the SPR at $57 per barrel and we didn't take it. It will be because 213 million barrels were floating on water, waiting for buyers, and we let China take them. It will be because we spent 50 years debating a $20 billion investment while the reserve sat half empty. America is the largest oil producer in the world. We produce 13.5 million barrels per day. We have the technology, the infrastructure, the expertise, but we don't have a full strategic petroleum reserve. And in 6, 9, 14 days, the market will start asking, when will they refill it? If you care about energy security, if you care about American resilience, if you care about protecting your family from $7 gas when the next crisis hits, then you need to understand what's happening right now. The clock is ticking, the reserve is half full, and the next crisis won't wait.